All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Glad you're able to join us today. And this is one of my favorite topics, mainly because it's one of my favorite tools. ECAC has created a whole bunch of different tools that parents can use to help them be better advocates for their children. And I mainly want to focus today on one we call talk tools, because that's one that can be used in a variety of situations. And it's one, as I said, that I share with families on a regular basis. So we're going to jump right into that, and then we'll talk about tips along the way. And I have a couple of additional things to wrap stuff up with. But first off, let me introduce myself. I'm Doreen Bird. I am the lead parent educator here with ECAC. And I've been with the organization for 25 years now, be hitting 26 come January. And I'm not going to say I've heard it all, but I've heard a lot. One thing that has become abundantly clear, though, is that communication is really at the root of a lot of the problems that we hear. And that goes both ways. You know, parents sometimes don't communicate effectively, and sometimes they don't get the information that they need in order to be good partners in this education process. So hence the need for the talk tools. And we're going to jump right into that. That's just an image of what that looks like, but I'll take you to the document itself so that we can expand on it and talk about different sections here. So let's go there. And hopefully I'll get the right thing. Yes, there we are. All right. As we say, we call this thing talk tools. And it's designed to be used, as I said, in a number of different situations. You may have parent-teacher conferences. It could be an IEP meeting or a 504 planning meeting. These questions can sometimes be asked via email, you know, if you're trying to get information about what's going on with your child. But they can help you get a clearer idea about what's going on, what's being proposed, you know, the benefits thereof, who's involved, etc. So the more information you have, the better informed you can be before you can make your own decisions or decide what you're going to promote or ask for, and understanding problems before you try to solve them. So one of the instructions for here, you know, the questions are just kind of idea starters. They're not going to be word for word appropriate for every situation, but they're ways of kind of triggering some thoughts and maybe helping you adapt the questions to the situation that you're currently dealing with. So, you know, as you read through them, think about what might be appropriate for what you're dealing with at the moment. So we got one that says here to start a new conversation. You know, would you be willing to help me think about ways to help my child? That can go any number of ways, but just sort of opening up the door to, I'm concerned about Johnny's reading. What can we do about that? My child is coming home saying that they don't have any friends. Is there anything that you can think of that might be helpful to help them make connections with other children? You know, the idea is just to invite the teacher or whoever it is that you're talking with to offer ideas about how to tackle a problem or a situation that you think needs to be addressed. So again, you just kind of want to open up a conversation instead of starting off with, here's what I want you to do. You know, it's all a two-way street, and that's the main point you want to get across to folks is, I want to hear what you've got to say. I want to be heard as well, but asking questions is an underrated form of advocacy. And, you know, this is a good way just to open up the door. Let's say we're talking about a proposal for how to address an issue. Trying to get some clarification about, okay, so what are we going to accomplish by doing this? You know, what's the point? What are we trying to find out? Understanding the goal or the intention of an action may be very helpful. And honestly, I say that a lot when I'm talking to parents about having modified assignments on their child's IEP as an accommodation. In order to figure out whether or not an accommodation is appropriate or modification is going to be appropriate, you need to ask, well, what's the point of the assignment? So for some things, you can reduce the volume of what's there and still accomplish the point of it. Sometimes you have to do the whole thing. Like you can't write half of a book report. Or if we're talking about, biography on somebody's life, we can't do half of it. Well, we'll get you to teenage years and then figure out what this person did from that point on. So sometimes you need to do the whole task in order to accomplish the intent. So, even on a day-by-day basis, getting clarity about what we're trying to do may be helpful in terms of what comes next. If we're looking at a skill or behavior or anything, making sure that everybody is talking about the same thing. So you want to say, okay, so what does that look like? Or like I talked to a parent yesterday and they mentioned that their child was fighting at school. I said, okay, when you say fighting, what does that look like? And what the parent described to me were a couple of kids, young children, squabbling over a toy. Well, that's very different than teenagers fist fighting in the hallway, yet we were using that same word to describe it. So getting clarification about, what it is that we're talking about. That comes in handy sometimes when you're looking at, say, IEP present levels of performance and the parent's idea of what their kid can do is different than what the teacher is saying the child can do. If we got two different senses of this child, that needs to get resolved, because if we're not on board on the same level of understanding about where they are, then how do you choose an appropriate goal and know whether or not this is something that needs to be worked on? So, trying to get clarification about that. Again, I got stories galore from hanging out here forever, but this is a classic example of this particular one. Is I was in a meeting one time and the parent was saying that their child, basically the present level said that child was unable to count to 10, and the parents going, well, yeah, he can do that. And the teachers kind of looking at him, and this was like an initial IEP, so these folks didn't really know the child well, but they were saying that he couldn't do this thing. What wound up happening was they asked the teacher, because the kid was there, they asked the parent to have him do that with her, demonstrate basically how she does it. And what the parent was doing was saying the number and having the child repeat. So she's going 1, he goes 1, 2, he goes 2, 3. Her notion of counting was very different than what the school meant by when they used that term. They were thinking about him doing this independently. And she's thinking, okay, he can say those words and count. Well, that explained why we had a mismatch, because we were looking at two very different skills. So again, trying to get clarification about what it is that we're talking about, what does it look like, how is this playing out, can be helpful to keep people or get people on the same page. Trying to find out whether or not something is worth working on. If we're looking at a goal, for example, is, okay, how is that going to help him? And there may be a very good answer to that question, or there may not be. If it turns out that like we're looking at high school kids that are still working on identifying coins, yeah, it's time to ask a good question about, okay, how was this useful, and is there another way, another approach that we need to be taking at this time? Folks come to a conclusion, you want to know, how'd you get there? And of course, data is supposed to be at the root of decision making for special education. So it's almost always going to be appropriate to ask about, do we have any data, or what data there is? Doing a show me thing is not bad. When you create IEP goals and they talk about how will progress be measured, I always tell parents at least one of those ways need to be something that somebody can show you, something concrete, rather it's notes of their observations. So you have an observation log, or we're looking at work samples, we're looking at tests, but there should be some evidence that actually shows the kid's progress. So, asking for, what's the basis for coming to that conclusion? Because maybe folks know something that you don't know, and if you knew that too, you may be on board with, all right, now that I know this, I understand how you got there. Then problem solving. Obviously, we spend a lot of time problem solving in special education, whether we're talking about, academic progress or solving, behavior challenges, or any kind of issue that way. Is trying to figure out, okay, what's already been done. Let's think about, especially if a child has been receiving services, for example, and we're not seeing the results that we wanted. Then trying to figure out, okay, what's been attempted? What do we need to do different going forward, or what can we do different? And how are we choosing the thing different? And why was that going to be appropriate for my child? But again, trying to get some details about, okay, you saying that you tried XYZ program. How long have you been doing this? How often? Because if we got, again, for example, a reading program that was designed, when you look at the research that says it's effective, the research is based on it being done 5 days a week for 45 minutes a day. Well, and it turns out that this kid is getting 4 days a week, 20 minutes. Well, then we actually aren't implementing that program the way it was designed. And maybe instead of changing to a different program, trying to do it the way it was intended may be the adjustment that's needed. So, just again, the details matter all the time, and as specific as you can be in terms of getting an understanding of what's going on will help you and everybody else do the problem solving, come up with the ideas and proposals that will help the kid ultimately. All right, so, again, we put things in place and you want to find out what the results are. As I said, there may be hard data for it. Sometimes it's, going to be more observational stuff. Sometimes you put a strategy in place, and let's say for a behavioral strategy, things may get worse rather than better. Okay, so what did we find out? Well, we found out if we give this kid unlimited opportunities to walk out of the classroom to calm down, that he finds himself calming down, every day, right about math time. All right, so we learned that, we need to put some boundaries around that particular strategy, and maybe give him one opportunity per day so that he can be a little bit more selective about how he does that, instead of just jumping up every time the thought hits him. Asking why a strategy or an approach was selected for a kid, I think is a legit question, because we're supposed to be talking about individualized education planning. And there's a lot of things out there that are research based, that show that they're effective with some groups of kids, but that doesn't mean it's going to be right for your child. So trying to find out, hey, why did we choose this particular strategy or this particular program, or recommending this particular classroom or particular setting, why are we doing this for my kid? And seeing if we can get some good, solid answers that speak to that child's unique needs, what their challenges are, what we've learned about how they think and do and react, and whatever. There should be a thoughtful process here. Trying to find out whether or not, how we can tell if something is working. Okay, because if we know what success looks like, then we'll also know when things are not being successful, if we're not seeing those changes and developments there. So again, being clear about, okay, we're going to try this particular strategy. How are we going to know if it's working? And if everybody, again, is on the same page, so we're on the alert for these signs of progress here, then if progress isn't happening, then everybody will also be seeing the same thing. And maybe we won't have to go as long with a failed strategy, because sometimes things get put into place and it's months before people realize that, no, this isn't working. When maybe that evidence was clear, a long time ago. And that was missed opportunities to make changes and make things better. Always asking about other options. There are very rarely going to be only one approach or one way to address a problem, address a situation, address a skill deficit, whatever it is. There's generally going to be more than one way to do things. And if you as a parent come to the table with an idea, it's okay to ask for other ideas, especially if somebody is shooting yours down. Then it's like, okay, so what else can we do? If the team has been presented with a need that the child has, the need doesn't go away just because your idea isn't one that folks can buy into. Then you just open up the floor to, okay, what else can we do? And if folks in the room that don't have the ideas, or they go, well, we've tried everything we know, then the next move is, okay, who else can we bring in? Who else can help us? Because it's never enough just to throw up your hands and go, we've done everything we can do and we're just going to let this kid fail, or we're just going to let this child not be able to go to school because their behavior is unmanageable. Failure is not an option, and so it's about, all right, if we've exhausted our brain power, then who else can we bring in? And if that means tapping into other resources within the school district, let's keep in mind the school district as a whole is who has responsibility for educating, the child. And you're not limited to the resources in that building. So there may be people with other skill sets, other training, other background who can be brought in. And if it turns out that there's not folks on staff that have that advanced skill set, then look for other people, beyond the school system or beyond your charter school that you can contract with, or contact DPI. Public instruction has people that have levels of expertise. They have consultants that work with schools. So reaching out and asking for help is always preferred over allowing a child to not be successful. As I said, it's just not an okay approach to things. We should never be satisfied with failure. And things tend to operate in a sequential way. Sometimes it's going to make sense to, okay, what are our next steps? We want to do this, and then what happens after that? So trying to find out what's going to happen. Again, yesterday I was talking to a parent who attended a referral meeting with the school system, and she walked away with paperwork that she interpreted as being her child's IEP, and told the people in the preschool program that her child had an IEP and they're looking for an IEP. Nobody clearly explained to her that that was only step one in a multi-step process. And so people understanding what happens next, what's coming up next, what do I need to do next, is really important to communicate. And we should not make assumptions. That, again, the question is the opposite of assumption. You find out for sure about something instead of just making guesses, or assuming that somebody meant this or they intended that, or what their rationale or the reasoning may be, because sometimes that filling the void with your own ideas about what may be going on can create problems. If you make a wrong assumption, say, for example, because a teacher didn't look particularly energetic when you saw her in the carpool line today, doesn't mean that she doesn't like you. It doesn't mean that she doesn't like your kid. It doesn't mean that she's disgusted and fed up. It could just mean that, she's not feeling well today. Or the teacher assistant, called in sick. And so she was wrangling with the, full class, and it was particularly challenging. As I said, a lot of times people make assumptions and they tend to not be in the positive direction. I tend to try and make them more positive interpretation about what may be happening. And that may be another, way we can sort of challenge ourselves is, okay, if this was somebody else that I knew was on board and had my kid's best interests at heart, how would I interpret that? So sort of maybe putting another person in that same role, and we may find it, being honest with ourselves, that no, we interpreted something in a negative way with this person, that we wouldn't have made that same interpretation with somebody else. And so kind of check ourselves with that. So anyway, this is the tool, the talk tools. And as I said, it's more of an idea starter. Some of the questions are going to work straight out as they are, but a lot of times you're going to want to modify and adapt. But there are ways of, again, getting engaged. Sometimes, again, parents sitting in IEP meetings find themselves listening to everything and not being able to jump in and be part of the conversation. Well, you don't have to always have the answers, but having good questions to ask is another way of engaging, and another way of sometimes steering things in the direction that you want. Questions can be, and I would say sometimes you can use questions to get other people to say things that you already know. But instead of you making an accusation and challenge, you ask them, so, tell me about what happened here, or how often are you pulling Susie to work with you, or how many kids are in the room when when you have them there, whatever it is. But you have the other people put the information on the table themselves. And in that way, it's there for everybody to address without, again, you coming off like a bad guy, accusing folks and putting them on the defensive. So, it just seems and feels more collaborative when you're asking questions a lot of times than it is making statements. So we're going to shift back into the tip sheet, and hopefully I can do this without creating problems here. We left there, and hopefully, no, click. All right, so now we're back to our PowerPoint. I'm going to move this bar down. It's blocking me, means it's probably blocking you. Oh, these little boxes here. All right, we're getting better. Fewer little boxes on the screen. One key point of in advocacy, relationship building, and the whole nine is to try to stay open-minded about things. Inviting other people to share ideas and information that then you can evaluate and discuss and offer your thoughts about. If something's going on that you are uncomfortable about, maybe your kid has come home and reported that something happened that day, or you're looking at their grade reports and you're seeing zeros or something, try to get as much information as you can before deciding what you need to do about it. So when you approach, the school, approach the teacher, start with questions. A lot of times that's going to be the way to go, is try to find out, oh, I saw in Power School that, Brandon has zeros. Does that mean that he actually failed a thing? Or is this work that he didn't turn in? Because I know I saw him do his homework. Then we can try to figure out what's happening between the time you saw the kid doing the homework and the zero sitting in Power School. But asking, like I say, leading with a question is going to be better than starting off with an accusation, like I say, or with a conclusion, because there may be an important piece of information that's missing that changes the entire picture. And I don't know about you, but I hate to be wrong. And I mean wrong in terms of factually wrong. There's things that people can have opinions about, and then there's things that are facts. And you want to get the facts straight before deciding what you want to do. And really important when we're talking about kids that have any kind of behavioral incident or something is get all the details around that incident. So again, you're asking questions about, where were they, who was around, what was going on, and what happened, what was the response. Okay, Susie threw something across the room. Okay, and then what happened? I like for folks to paint a picture. And if I can sort of envision things playing out, then it makes more sense to me. But then you can maybe see the points at which something went wrong. And that gives you room to work with as far as interventions or things that can be done differently to prevent it from happening again. But the details matter. One of our sort of lines around ECAC is that it depends is the answer to almost any question about special education and education of kids with disabilities, in general. So those details around the child, the situation, what grade were they in, what kind of disability did they have, all of that stuff can make a difference as far as, okay, what do we need to do? Granted, we got some kind of a problem, we need to understand the problem and then figure out where we go from there. So staying open-minded and inquisitive. So the open and learning here, trying to get this thing to advance, and it doesn't want to. Let me do here's my cursor. Okay, yeah, I knew it was gonna do that. All right, sometimes you don't want to ask questions or be careful about how you do it. If you're trying to make a proposal or a suggestion of something you want somebody to do, don't ask a question that no can be an answer to. So, we got a little example here, can we do an assistive technology evaluation? Well, yeah, we can, or somebody may say, no, we can't do it. But you make a statement, I want to have this done. Or that you feel like your child needs an accommodation. I've seen parents write emails to the school and they're, we've already talked through the points that they need to make or things that need to be part of that communication. And then they end it with tell me what your thoughts are. And I'm going, no, you're sharing what your thoughts are or what it is that you want to recommend or the steps that you want people to take. You don't then turn around and at the end of that and go, hey, I'm just, because what that sounds like is you're just kicking that idea around. If it's something you really want to have happen, then you just say it straight out is I'd like to see this, or, again, make a statement instead of asking a question. And certainly if you're going to ask a question, ask an open-ended question, not one that no can be a answer to if that's not the answer that you want. All right, we got a quickie survey for what we're doing here today. Again, mainly was introducing this tool to you and talking about how it can be used. If you take just a couple of seconds to respond to that, that'd be very helpful to us. All right, Andrea, is that everybody?
It's still going. We'll give another minute or so. If anyone has any questions, feel free to
Oh yeah, absolutely.
add in the chat area. We have a couple minutes. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
And the questions don't have to be specifically about the tool. It can be about, because we're saying that this is an advocacy tool. So if we have questions about advocacy in general, or anything, because I'm game, and we got a little bit of time. Sometimes we don't have time at the end of these presentations, but we do today.
We'll let everyone know next Tuesday. You can join us. We're going to be honoring Hispanic Heritage Month with our bilingual ECA staff. They're going to be highlighting books that parents can use to reinforce reading skills in either language to their children. So put that on your calendar. Feel free to join us next Tuesday. We are about 76% on the evaluation. Think we are good. If there are no more questions, we will give you your time back on this Tuesday. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Doreen, for sharing your words of wisdom and our talk tool sheet with everyone. I did link that in the chat. It is located on our website, so feel free to use that.
Yeah, and I told Andre, I thought it was kind of ironic that at the top of the slide, with our contact information says, please ask questions. Because we're
Yeah.
talking about questions, and certainly that's what we're here for all the time, is to answer questions that people may have about special education or how they can be better advocates for their kids. So I will stop that and show our lovely little faces here. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you, everyone.